The human mechanic stepped onto the airplane, dragging a worn tool bag behind them. The floor of the cabin gleamed under bright lights, and the first-class seats shimmered in their polished comfort. The passengers were settling in, murmuring softly, among themselves, unaware of the unusual presence that was about to enter the room. The mechanic's eyes flicked to the empty seat at the very front, the one that promised a few hours of uninterrupted peace and a place to rest after weeks of working on engines that groaned like old dragons. But before the mechanic could even imagine sinking into the plush leather cushions, a sudden hush swept across the cabin as a shadow moved against the light. The chatter died down, and heads turned slowly. A massive veteran dragon emerged from the aisle, its scales dull from years of battle, and its wings folded neatly against its sides. But even folded, they filled the space with an unspoken threat and majesty. The dragon's eyes scanned the cabin slowly, and passengers instinctively leaned back, as if the air around it carried weight. The mechanic froze briefly, a mixture of fear and awe washing over them. The dragon exhaled softly, a mist curling through the cabin like a whisper from a distant mountain. The passengers gasped, and someone dropped a glass, but no sound could fully capture the presence that entered the room. The dragon's gaze rested on the first-class seat for a heartbeat. It lingered there, like a memory, recalling something lost long ago. The mechanic felt a strange pull in their chest, a call to act, a sudden knowing that this was a moment that would be remembered for lifetimes. Some passengers were already fidgeting, trying to hide cameras. Some whispered frantic questions. Others held their breath, waiting for the dragon to speak or move. But the veteran dragon moved with quiet dignity. Every step calculated, every movement precise, and yet natural, as if the cabin had always been meant to hold such a creature. The hum of the engines faded in comparison to the energy that radiated from its scales. The mechanic gripped their tool bag tighter. But there was no fear, only an urgent need to do the right thing, to honor what was standing before them. And then the dragon lowered its head slightly, a gesture that seemed both patient and expectant. The human mechanic knew in that instant that the decision they were about to make would change everything, and even the first-class seat felt like it belonged to something far greater than comfort itself. The passengers stared wide-eyed as the veteran dragon slowly moved toward the first-class seat, each scale catching the cabin light like shards of metal. The dragon lowered itself with care, its massive wings folding neatly against its back like the pages of an ancient book. The human mechanic stepped aside, giving the dragon room. Their heart raced, but their face remained calm. The whispers in the cabin grew louder, some passengers pointing, others fumbling for cameras. But the dragon paid no attention. It only focused on the seat, its clawed feet brushing gently against the carpet, as if afraid to damage the world around it. The mechanic watched closely, ready to intervene if anything went wrong, but nothing did. The dragon settled into the seat almost like a king claiming a throne. Passengers held their breath, marveling at the impossibility of the scene. The dragon exhaled softly, a warm mist curling into the air, and the hum of the engines felt distant. In comparison, the human mechanic felt a strange sense of peace, knowing they had made the right choice. They lowered themselves into the smaller seat nearby, carrying their bag carefully, trying not to disturb the dragon. The dragon's eyes flicked toward the mechanic for a moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that needed no words. A connection formed between human and beast that transcended explanation. The other passengers were frozen in a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief. No one dared move too quickly. No one dared break the fragile balance that had settled over the cabin. Even the flight attendants paused, uncertain how to proceed, as the veteran dragon made itself comfortable in the first-class seat, and the human mechanic sat quietly, ready to see what would come next. The air in the cabin felt different, charged with anticipation, as if the impossible was only beginning to unfold, and every person aboard could feel that something extraordinary was about to happen. The human mechanic took a deep breath and stood slowly there, eyes meeting the dragon's wise ancient gaze. For a moment, the cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The dragon tilted its head slightly, studying the mechanic as if it could see straight into their thoughts. Passengers leaned forward, murmuring softly, unable to look away. The mechanic stepped closer to the first-class seat, feeling the heat radiating from the dragon's scales. Their hand hovered for a heartbeat before they spoke softly. Without really expecting an answer, they offered the seat to the dragon. The gesture simple, but the weight of it immense. The dragon blinked once slowly, then twice. The cabin was silent, even the engines seemed to pause. The dragon lowered its head in acknowledgement, as if it understood the human gesture, and the impossible connection between them deepened. The passengers gasped, some murmured, disbelief. Others shook their heads, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. The dragon curled slightly into the seat, wings folding like a cloak around its massive body. The human mechanic took a step back, letting the dragon have the space it needed. Their chests swelled with pride and something else, a strange warmth that felt like destiny passing through their veins. The other passengers stared in awe. The dragon exhaled. A long, slow breath, mist curling into the air, filling the cabin with a sense of calm and power. The human mechanic returned to their small seat, their hands resting lightly on their tool bag, but their mind was elsewhere, thinking of what had just happened. The dragon shifted slightly, its eyes never leaving the mechanic, and in that glance there was understanding, trust, and a silent promise that the impossible might be closer than anyone dared imagine. The cabin felt changed, charged with anticipation, and every soul aboard sensed that nothing would ever be the same again. The passengers whispered nervously, some pointing fingers, some hiding their mouths in shock, their eyes wide and hearts racing, unable to fully believe what they were seeing. The veteran dragon settled into the first-class seat with an elegance that made the cabin feel both smaller and larger at the same time. The human mechanic sat quietly, observing the reactions around them, feeling a strange mixture of pride and unease. A young child peeked from behind a seat and gasped softly. The parents hushed them, while stealing glances at the dragon. Others fumbled with phones but hesitated, too afraid to capture what felt sacred. The dragon tilted its head slowly and looked around the cabin, its eyes lingering on each passenger, as if acknowledging their presence without judgment. The human mechanic watched the subtle movements, feeling a strange calm in the midst of chaos. The murmurs grew louder. Some passengers whispered questions about what kind of creature it was, where it had come from, and why it had been allowed to fly first class. The dragon exhaled a soft mist that curled through the air, carrying a warmth that made some shiver involuntarily. Even the flight attendants paused, unsure of what to do. Some leaned against the walls, wide-eyed. The human mechanic shifted slightly, adjusting their seat but never taking their eyes off the dragon. There was a tension in the air, like a quiet storm waiting to break, and yet a sense of awe held it at bay. The dragon moved its massive claw, slightly resting it on the armrest as if claiming its place. The cabin felt alive with anticipation, as if every passenger knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would not be forgotten. The human mechanic breathed slowly, feeling the weight of the impossible moment, and somewhere deep inside they understood that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everyone aboard in ways that no one could yet imagine. The dragon shifted slightly in the first-class seat, stretching its massive wings carefully, so they did not disturb the passengers. The human mechanic watched intently, their hands resting on their lap, feeling a strange connection passing silently between them. The dragon exhaled a soft, warm mist that filled the air with a calming scent. The passengers leaned back, unsure whether to move or stay frozen in awe. Some whispered softly about the courage of the human and the majesty of the dragon. The mechanic offered a small smile to the dragon, and in response, the dragon lowered its head almost imperceptibly, a silent nod that spoke of respect and understanding. The cabin felt quieter. Somehow the hum of the engines fading into the background, and for a brief moment the impossible seemed possible. The human mechanic realized that kindness and courage could form a bond, stronger than fear, stronger than disbelief, and stronger than the vast distance between human and dragon. The plane lurched slightly, as if reminding everyone aboard that they were still far from safety. Passengers clutched armrests and glanced nervously at each other. The hum of the engines grew louder, and yet beneath it there was something else, a strange vibration that made the human mechanic sit up straighter, their eyes flicking to the veteran dragon. The creature tensed its wings, flexing subtly, and the scales along its back rippled as if sensing something invisible in the air. The passengers whispered nervously, their voices low but urgent. The dragon shifted its gaze toward the windows, the sky outside darkening in patches despite the sunlight above. The human mechanic felt a shiver run down their spine. A low hum seemed to vibrate through the cabin, as if the plane itself was responding to some force they could not see or name. The dragon exhaled a slow hiss of warm mist that swirled like smoke, carrying a faint metallic scent. The passengers froze, caught between fear and fascination. The mechanic gripped their tool bag tighter, their instincts screaming that something was coming, that nothing in the manuals or training could prepare them for the dragon's eyes. glowed faintly, catching the light in an unnatural way, and for the briefest moment it looked as if the cabin was bathed in gold. The passengers leaned forward, uncertain whether to run or watch the impossible unfold outside the plane. The clouds twisted in unnatural patterns, shadows stretching across the windows. The dragon flexed its claws, resting lightly on the armrests. The human mechanic noticed the tiny hairs on their arms standing on end. The vibration grew stronger through the floor and seats, and suddenly a loud crack reverberated through the plane. As if the air itself had split, the dragon raised its head higher, wings trembling, and a low growl escaped from deep in its throat. The human mechanic swallowed hard, feeling adrenaline surge, knowing that whatever was coming, the passengers would never forget, and that the bond between human and dragon would be tested beyond anything imaginable. The dragon rose slowly from the seat, its massive wings unfolding with a sound like thunder rolling through the cabin. The passengers screamed and ducked their heads. Some clutched each other tightly, unable to comprehend the sight. The human mechanic stood frozen, their heart hammering, as the dragon's eyes glowed brighter, casting light across every surface of the cabin. The hum that had been building exploded into a roar. The plane shuddered violently. Passengers gripped seats and straps, as if holding on for their lives. The dragon tilted its head, and a beam of golden light shot from its eyes, striking the plane like a guiding force. The metal groaned but did not break. The impossible was happening. The veteran dragon's wings flared wide, each feather shimmering as if made of molten gold. The cabin vibrated with power, and yet the dragon moved with precision, gentle and controlled. The human mechanic could barely breathe, watching as the plane stabilized midair. The dragon exhaled a burst of warm mist that spiraled around the engines. Carrying a faint glow, the turbulence vanished as suddenly as it had begun. The passengers peeked from under their arms, wide-eyed mouths open. The dragon landed back in the first-class seat, its wings folding neatly once more, and the glow fading slowly, leaving only a sense of awe and relief. The human mechanics sank back into their seat, exhausted, their hands trembling and eyes filled with wonder, knowing that nothing aboard the plane would ever be ordinary again. The veteran dragon lowered its head slightly in a gesture of calm, and the passengers realized they had witnessed a miracle. The cabin was silent for a long moment, broken only by soft breaths and the hum of the engines. Passengers stared at the dragon in disbelief. Some still pressed their hands to their mouths, unable to speak. The human mechanic slumped slightly in their seat, heart racing and palms damp from adrenaline. They looked at the dragon and felt a strange pride and gratitude mingled with exhaustion. Whispers spread through the cabin as everyone tried to process what they had witnessed. Children peeked from behind seats, their eyes wide and bright. Parents clutched them protectively, but also stared in awe. The dragon lowered its massive head, resting it lightly on the armrest, eyes flicking toward the mechanic in a gesture of silent thanks. The passengers shifted slowly, some laughing nervously, others shaking their heads as if to wake from a dream. The human mechanic reached out a hand slowly and brushed it along the dragon's scaled snout, feeling warmth and strength under their fingers. The dragon nuzzled gently in response, a quiet bond forming that needed no words. Flight attendants moved cautiously, checking passengers, but even they seemed humbled by the scene. The hum of conversation began to rise, soft at first, then stronger as people shared glances and murmurs of disbelief and admiration. The plane felt different, somehow charged with energy and reverence, as if the impossible had left its mark on every soul aboard. The veteran dragon lifted its head slightly and exhaled a warm mist that swirled through the cabin. The human mechanic smiled quietly, realizing that courage, kindness, and a single choice had changed everything, and that the story of this flight would be told for years as the impossible had become real before their eyes. The plane descended slowly toward the runway, the passengers still wide-eyed and trembling from what they had witnessed. The veteran dragon sat calmly in the first-class seat, its wings folded neatly and eyes soft and steady. The human mechanic leaned back, their hands resting on the tool bag, feeling a strange mixture of relief, pride, and awe. The hum of the engines sounded ordinary now, but the memory of power and light still lingered in the cabin. The passengers whispered excitedly, comparing stories of what had happened. Some still could not believe it was real. Others smiled quietly, feeling lucky to have witnessed something extraordinary. The dragon tilted its head toward the mechanic and lowered it in a gesture that felt like gratitude, respect, and understanding rolled into one. The mechanics smiled softly, their chests swelling with warmth, knowing that their small act of kindness had led to something miraculous. The plane touched down smoothly. The passengers erupted into quiet applause and cheers. Some clapped their hands, others took tentative pictures, still unable to fully comprehend the impossible that had unfolded. The dragon exhaled a gentle mist one last time, and the cabin seemed filled with calm and reverence. The human mechanic looked around, seeing the awe and wonder in every face, and felt a deep sense of connection to the world. In that moment, they realized that courage, empathy, and a single selfless choice could ripple out to change everything, even for creatures as impossible and magnificent as a veteran dragon. And as the doors opened and the passengers prepared to disembark, the mechanic and the dragon shared a silent promise that neither would forget the day when the impossible had become reality.